Okay, so the crux of it is what the heck is the sourcing point? That's this entire discussion. Let me make sure that I'm recording. Yeah, it looks like it's recording. It has audio input capture on. And if it's not, I'll probably have another session anyways. So, the idea of sourcing is that you have to start off by thinking about what is history. Is it is history as a concept set in stone? Or is history a story? You've known the cheesy joke of his story being a story or her story, or things like that. But the idea of sourcing, we're addressing this here. Why do we care about the sourcing point? Why does it matter? So the sourcing point is god dang it. The sourcing point is you need to address the limitations of your document, of your argument. Also, I'm audible, right? Because I'm not seeing anything in this chat that's complaining otherwise. Okay. So the idea is that documents are not omniscient. You will never have every document giving you the entire view of everything. And nobody is obligated to even give you enough documents to give you the entire point of view. I could give you a 7-document DBQ on the Civil War, entirely from the South's perspective, entirely from historians who supported the idea of that antebellum South, of the idyllic and agrarian society there. And you would have to write a DBQ on that. 7 documents, all supporting like states' rights and having absolutely nothing to do with slavery. That's a DBQ I could give you. I'm not obligated to give you an actually justified and neutral point of view with a DBQ. You should be getting a DBQ that has multiple perspectives, but reality is, after APUSH, after AP World, nobody is going to take that. Most people will not take that time to give you that holistic perspective. So sourcing is what lets you realize, okay, there's some spots here that we're missing. Where do we need to go? Where do we need to go next? I'll be addressing that in a bit. The door just closed. There's also the other area of sourcing where we're understanding the underlying mechanics and motivations. This is the part where sourcing is more about trying to understand the how and the why. Your argument and what matters, your description, your argument, that is generally just what matters. Here's the event, here's my perspective on that event, and here's how it shows this thesis. Sourcing, this alternative way of sourcing by understanding underlying mechanics and motivations, it's saying, okay, here's why specifically or how specifically these people in this era acted the way they did. Were their hands being forced? Is this what they had to do to survive? And that can have a lot of value when you look at history as, in that phrase, those who do not know history are doomed to repeat it. That phrase is often said, but sourcing is where that phrase actually becomes valid. Sometimes you have a historical event that may not work in its entirety because of certain underlying mechanics and motivations within it. And that's pretty much what I said there. It's where history becomes useful. It also lets you establish your limits on your arguments, where it does not hold true, or where it can change or it can alter, and where it may not be entirely consistent. And also when you're working with high level documents, for example, if you were to actually become a history major, having that sourcing basis, I will be eventually showing how to do an outline. Having a basis for the being able to ask where do I not have enough information is key in actually finding out where you actually need to look next. Like, do you have enough information from this side or that side? And then sourcing is where you can answer that question. Becoming a history major is inadvisable if you actually want a stable career, but there are options. Technical writing is always a thing that exists. So now we ask, now that I've addressed the underlying motivations of sourcing, we need to ask what is actually sourcing. So this is what the rubric has. You need to choose at least 3 documents. You need to explain how or why the point of view, purpose, historical situation, and audience are relevant. And that explaining how or why is key, because you cannot earn the point just by identifying it. You cannot say, oh, this magazine was made for women. That means nothing to me. I'm sitting there as a reader scratching my head. Why does this matter? How does this matter? Why do we care that's made specifically for a woman? Why can't we just change it's this document made for men? That changes things. You can't make the same, in that specific scenario, you cannot make the same document for different audiences. That's not that would not make sense from that era. And you need to, and as I said, understand the underlying motivations. That's where you can understand the underlying motivations. Like, oh, this document, we'll be addressing this later. It's the 21 DBQ for APUSH, so I'll save it for there. And this is how you earn a point. You must explain how or why, as I've been emphasizing again and again. Okay, I ran out of time when making this, so I have to switch to a different area. This is for DBQs, but I will be addressing LAQs shortly. And we'll also be addressing the rubric as a whole. Let me pull that up while we discuss it. This is not an AP World session, but this is not an APUSH session. It's not an AP Euro session. It's for all three AP histories, and I'll be going through DBQs from all three histories because the skills will be the same throughout every single history. Yes, it's only addressing FRQs, but particularly DBQs. LEQs are simpler in my experience in terms of the analysis. I do have a reason in choosing to emphasize sourcing though, because a 5 out of 7 and 6 out of 7 are extremely different. If you look at the implied knowledge that a student would have coming in, like I gave that example of the Civil War. Evaluate the extent to which states' rights were the cause of the American Civil War. You can get 7 documents from the southern states supporting that states' rights, and you would be in a 5 out of 7 walk out of the test going, "Oh, the Civil War was caused by states' rights." Whereas if you was a 6 out of 7 would go, "Okay, we don't have the entire information, we don't have the entire story. We think these documents say that it was caused by states' rights, but we don't have the entire perspective. We don't know the Northerners, the states, the actual congressmen we don't know even the historical context if it's just focused on like afterwards." My teacher recommends sourcing only 3 sources and trying to make the best DBQ with those 3 in attempt to get 5 out of 7. So that would be thesis context, describe 3, source 3. Trying to watch this while at work, rip you. Okay. So this is the actual DBQ rubric. A 7 out of 7 means you also know the nuances in history. Where does this argument limit? I'll have to address the complexity point separately because there are 5 different ways to get it, and I have a whole document on this with basis from the College Board FRQs. Okay, so this is the rubric, but I actually promised that we would be addressing sourcing first. When you do your demo DBQ, can you try complexity? I actually usually try complexity in multiple facets. You see that rubric, it has 5 different ways. I usually try for like 2 or 3 different ways all at the same time, because I have no basis to prove a DBQ. I have no basis really in the FRQ points. Okay. So this is taken from 21 AP World. This is the evidence beyond document. It's the wrong area. We're looking at sourcing. Okay, so sourcing. This is where we have identify. There's some other questions in the chat that are not really related to DBQ, so I won't address them. Am I the only course consultant here right now? Oh well. Okay, so we have here an identify example. It shows how popular Zapata was among the popular people, and that many people in Mexico were killed. Okay, now we have to ask, why does this matter? How does this matter? Why does it matter that it's Zapata that's popular? Why does it matter that people were sad? How does this affect the information being displayed? And we have over here. Here's an explanation. The corrido is meant to memorialize a hero of the revolution and to motivate the people to carry on his struggle. Here's where it becomes important. It's meant to memorialize. Here we have an action verbal and action phrase. As a reader, I can see, oh, here's the specific effect that this bias, which has on this document. It's memorializing. It's motivating. They want to punish the rich and make Indians owners of the land. Okay, let me check the other one. Document 5 does not have a similar one, but these other ones will work. So this is an example of what I meant by it's understanding the limitations. This is also an example of understanding limitations. Focused only on the positive aspects and lavishes praise. As a reader, this shows, okay, this student knows that this document is not entirely true, that there are limitations to where this document can be used. It's lavishing praise. Maybe he might be hiding some things. And this becomes important for complexity later. Once you get the sourcing, that's a bridge complexity, usually. This is the Mexican Revolution DBQ. I've heard claims that this one was graded easier. I did not find a basis for that in the chief reader report. Complexity is multiple options. I will not address complexity as any single method or any single way, because I feel like that is dangerously reductive in regards to how complexity works. Because complexity is, in my mind, essentially saying you have a basis. The student has a basis for an undergraduate in history. Addressing different points of views is a possible way. That was essentially applied in the Heimler in one of Heimler's videos just now about complexity. Let me pull up the document for that. 1, 2. Yeah, this is what he meant here. As I've been saying over and over again, we have two very brilliant men. They are both PhDs in historian, I assume, Eric Foner and Kenneth M. Stamp. They're both addressing the same event. They have entirely different perspectives on this event. And that's where we change from the history of elementary, middle, and high school of it's just a series of events to how do we understand the narrative of history. And I'll be going back to that once I address complexity, but right now I promised that we're addressing sourcing, so we're addressing sourcing first. I have to focus on sourcing. And here we have another example. In his speech, Consul Godot is being deferential. Okay, if he's being deferential, that means he may be because he's conscious of his influence. Okay, that shows that the student knows why historical actors act the way they do, and it also shows that they understand where there may be gaps. It doesn't necessarily say hiding something, but it may be more so he may not be able to tell the whole truth, or he may be changing the connotations of his phrases. You don't have to go you evidently do not have to go that detailed of he's changing his mind, he's changing how he's saying, but you do have to at least have some word or some phrase that denotes why this matters. Is using diagrams of complexity allowed? Yeah, you have to. I have to address complexity later on. I have an explicit example, but right now it's for sourcing. Okay, so let me scroll down let me check the sourcing on this one. Honestly, if you guys just want to skip past sourcing, if I've emphasized enough in like 10 minutes somehow that you guys have somehow revitalized your entire understanding of sourcing, I can just move on to specific DBQ analysis or DBQ rubric analysis. The methods of complexity, yeah, it would change if you'd still want to use documents. Addressing a missing POV, that was a former complexity-esque point. It was one of the things they used to ask, what document are we missing from this? Another one was, hey, do you know, like a synthesis, a relevant party to a future event or a past event? But either way, this is describe 3 documents, source 3. I tell you how to describe all 6 documents. You have to argue all 6 documents. Good luck arguing without describing. Oh god. Okay. Do you guys want me to move on to the entire rubric? Because I only plan to address sourcing for this. How much evidence beyond the points? It's 1. That's it. You get 1. Yeah, it is literally just 1. Okay, we're just gonna move on to the rubric. I think I've spoken enough about sourcing specifically. If we have specific problems, we're looking at it again anyways. So this is the rubric. If your teacher hasn't showed it to you this late in the game, that's a problem. So we start off with a thesis. You had to respond to it with a relevant thesis. You guys are more focused on complexity than sourcing, probably because I baited you guys with it earlier. Oopsies. Do you need to analyze the outside sourcing? Yeah. You can't just say, oh, by the way, Bolshevik Revolution, and just leave it at that. It's ridiculous. Okay, let me look at thesis. So these are some examples of theses from the Mexican Revolution document, and here are some examples of ones that don't work. I'm going to look at the ones that don't work first. They fail to establish a line of reasoning. Economic factors. This is vague. I don't know what this writer is saying, especially because this is actually the prompt. It's literally just economic factors. Establishes a line of reasoning but fails to provide historically defensible claim. This is the actual one where you were just historically wrong. There is no basis for this. In slaves and plantations, that was not the case. Do not focus on the topic of the prompt. This is just silly. Why would you ever write this? Okay, now we're looking at the ones that earn the point. The standards are essentially broken down into 3. Establishes a line of reasoning that validates the topic of the prompt with analytic categories. Those 3 separate clauses are 3 separate standards for it. This is minimally acceptable, and that's just establishes a line of reasoning. You have a basis more specific than just, it's economic factors. Establishes a line of reasoning that validates the topic of the prompt, and the categories, they don't differ realistically, I never actually saw too much of a difference, but I am reading it right now. Okay, it just looks to be more specific. But either way, it works. Analytic categories is probably more specific in general. However many body paragraphs you have. How many claims you need a thesis? Like the Mexican Revolution, I'm just using this as an example. I haven't researched it at all. I just use it as an example over and over again. How many claims do you need in a thesis? It's 2 or 3, usually. Oh, we usually say 2 or 3. And either of those may be a counter argument. And you may ask yourself, is a counter argument allowed? Yes, it's allowed. I would usually say 2 to 3 because once you get beyond 2 to 3, once you get beyond 3, it starts looking kind of wonky. Like you just have 4 separate paragraphs for 7, you get like 2 or 1 per paragraph. It's weird. Okay, so we have the thesis down. The context, it is broader historical context. I know nothing about this prompt. What do you need to tell me to talk about this prompt? Mexican Revolution. I'm sitting there like, okay, why are the Mexicans revolting? I do not understand. Your job is to say it was industrialization. The Mexicans were industrializing. They were seeking profits, and they preferred a very free market system at the time because free market capitalism was more so rampant. Around this time, you would have the American Gilded Age and things like that. Let's look at a context. And context, I would usually say it's like 3 to 4 key processes, key vocab. You can do way below that. Isn't the Mexicans revolting because of the one family dictatorship rule? I did not research this enough, but the nice thing about DBQ is that you can just not know it. You can theoretically not know anything about this prompt and still get like 4 out of 7. So here's an example of a context that did work. Okay, I know nothing. During the 18th through 20th century, harsh working conditions caused by industrialization led to an outbreak of revolutions. Oh, okay. So why the Mexicans are revolting? Oh, it's industrialization. Why is it industrialization? Harsh working conditions. There we go. We now know why the Mexicans are revolting. And it's one sentence. I would not suggest you do one sentence, but this is one sentence. If we look at the APUSH version, it is a bit longer. Okay, now that we have context down, we are looking at evidence. Use the content of at least 3 documents to address the topic of the prompt. This is literally you described the documents. This is like the lower level prompt that's for the students who barely pass their class and barely understand how to interpret old English. Can you just at least tell me what those documents are about? Okay, and they give you a point for that. Argue with 6. Okay, now you have to jump from describing to arguing. And now we look at an example for that because it's kind of nebulous when you look at it like that. This is describing. Finance minister tells strikers that unemployment results supply and demands out of the government's hands. Okay, that's true. That's the document. Now saying that, like, okay, why does it matter? Okay, and it's a position which probably increased people's discontent with the government because they were unwilling to help. Okay, if the thesis was like, oh, they're revolting because the government is incapable of helping, this bridges the gap between the finance minister that says we can't help to, okay, now you don't need to actually know the topics that you're saying. You just need to know, you just need to know like the logical chain and the argumentation. I will change over to an APUSH DBQ, but if the easiest DBQ, it would probably be easier for me to look at the 2019 DBQ. That's also very general. That's very general. It's Portuguese in the Indian Ocean. Let me pull that one up. Actually, it's probably easier. This one is in a slightly different format. Okay, so now that's the argumentation. You need to connect between here's the thing that happened, here's what we know happened, and here's what it proves about this thesis. And then here is the 2019 DBQ, which should have examples. Okay, these aren't the same, but this would be an example. This is just a description of what happens. There's an argument of what happened. Shows how in Cambay, the Portuguese are almost completely dependent. So that is debatable. Document 6 may not be interpreted that way. That's an argument. But it's not an argument the same way that it's English persuasive. It's an argument in the sense of, here's the narrative that I have constructed to describe this entire process and event, which can be debated, as you've seen with this. The narrative can be debated. And if you have made a debatable narrative, you have made a historical defensible thesis. Next point. Evidence beyond the document. It's pretty much what it says. You have evidence beyond the document. You have to interpret it, whatever. Glad those have multiple options. Oh, that's where I keys. Okay. Now we get to the sourcing point. This is addressed earlier. Sourcing 5 out of 7 and 6 out of 7 are numerically similar, but very different in the underlying thought process and logic needed. Let me pause for a moment. Oh, that was horrible. Okay. So, and now we get to, so sourcing we addressed earlier, now we get to complexity, which has 5 separate ways to get it. And I have an entire research document for this, which will be posted in the chat in a moment. Okay, so these are compiled commentaries from the various ones, and also a. Let me get the document posted, because I need it. I have 3 separate devices. Any advice on using sourcing as a support argument? If you came late, that I already addressed that, but I will address it again. So the idea of sourcing, let me just go over here and ow. So these are why we care about the sourcing point. There are 2 essential motives in addressing the sourcing point, and how you would get them. You would either be addressing the limitations or understanding the underlying mechanics and motivations. Addressing the limitations to support the argument from an English writing persuasive perspective, that would technically not make your argument better. You would be saying, okay, there's some points where we cannot rely on, where this argument may not hold true, or where we cannot tell the entire story, because you will never be able to have the entire story. Humans are not omniscient, and neither are the documents. And this is something that, and nobody's obligated to give you the entire perspective on a matter. Civil War example again, 7 documents, all from the states' rights, all from the South, all revisionist. You can still write DBQ on that. You would just get a 5 out of 7 would walk away knowing, okay, I guess states' rights did cause Civil War. A 6 out of 7 would say, no, we actually don't have enough to conclude that. And then start looking at the other details, and 6 out of 7 would realize, okay, there is actually a significant difference. Understanding underlying mechanics and motivations. This is one that I recently added because several of these sourcing points don't actually get it for addressing a limitation. For example, this one was most likely aimed at an audience of female magazine readers. It helps shape gender norms of domesticity. That's not really a limitation, but it shows that the person knows, okay, I can see this document. It gives me these details. How does the context of this document impact the way it relays information? Because no document and no information is ever going to be made in a vacuum. It will have motivations and it will have mechanics underlying that. So you don't necessarily have to have the sourcing improve the thesis, improve the argument, or make it stronger. You just need it to be relevant and germane, and it has to have some role in the way that information is relayed in your argument. I see people typing in the chat, so explaining why the document is relevant to your argument. No, that's the argumentation point. Sourcing is explaining the outside context of that point, of outside context of that information, because no information is made in a vacuum, and it's everything as I said so far. This is another example of it. CPAPs, HAPPYs. Oh god, there are several acronyms for sourcing. There's HIPS, HIPPO, HAPPY, CAPS, AP CAP, etc. So guys say the AP calculators are reliable, screw them. Just like, do your best, man. You can't control. Don't take bets on whether or not the Louisiana kids will fail. Hypothetically, only use one type of HIP. That's not a rubric point. They have no basis for getting you that. They have 0 basis for making you lose points there. Like, if that was important enough, they would have to have it in this note section that you can see down here. Well, you also have to be careful with historical context. You can't just use the same like contextualized event. But the document should not be so narrow to the event that you can use the same context. But you could theoretically just use different historical context for everything, like this one. Reflects the way that military experience and benefits created new opportunities for veterans. That's an example of the underlying mechanics and processes that I mentioned. Yeah, this should be recorded, so you guys can refer back to this. The only problem is that it's also a hot mess because I am not a professional teacher. So, okay, now we get into complexity before we actually get into how you get complexity, which I cannot say with authority. I have only looked at FAQs and how they are graded. So know that this is all taken with a grain of salt. However, my only strength is the fact that I know that I have spoken to historians before and how like history becomes matter. My teacher keeps marking us points off for messing with handwriting. About that, no, that doesn't matter. I got 5 with this handwriting. This is my APUSH test. I have the FAQs. This is technically illegal for me to show, but I don't care. They don't dock points for handwriting. You just have to be vaguely legible, and this counted as legible. Unless you wanted to tell me right now that my execute, LQ, and DBQ were all thrown in the trash. It just has to be vaguely readable. There are some god awful DBQ handwritings out there. Like this one is pretty good, but let me get DBQ 2022 AP Word. Oh, dang it! Which one was it? Yeah, I recall talking to my AP Lang teacher about that, and she was talking about how like college was seems to choose such god awful handwritings for some of the prompts, which is really funny because one of the AP Lang prompts was about handwriting. Actually, let me check. How bad was handwriting on the Actually, let me check. I really want to see how bad was the handwriting on that one. Most handwriting because the teacher saying F doesn't give you high scores. No, they're not gonna do that. Okay, good. The AP Lang handwriting prompts is actually decent handwriting. This is legible. It's just cursive. Now I have to see. Did they give the worst one also the one with god awful handwriting? Nah, that one's fine. Just don't write. So if you guys want to improve your handwriting, it's mainly more on the forearm than actually in the wrist. The more you move your wrist around, the worse your handwriting gets. That's how I improved my handwriting. It makes no sense when I speak of it, but it did work for me. You just have to move your arm all around. You just have to move your forearm more than your wrist. Okay, where were we? Oh yes, we were at the complexity point. Okay, so I addressed sourcing earlier. Okay, it's the limitations, but for improving your handwriting, it's the wrist versus the forearm. You can either move your wrist around a whole bunch, or you move your forearm up, or you move your forearm holding your wrist stable. Okay, so this is the basis I have for for complexity and historiography. So I was sidetracking. No, it's fine. I guess I'm just addressing the entire FAQ section in general. So this is taken from a historian who currently has a PhD, but he didn't have a PhD when this was he didn't have his PhD when he spoke about this, but he has a basis for this, is what I'm saying. Oh yeah, I never actually introduced my credentials and why I can talk about this. I got 5s in both AP Word and APUSH for 2020 and 2021. So for AP Word, I was only writing a DBQ, and I got 5 on that. So I don't know how the point scaling was calculated for 2020, but that implies that I can at least write a 5 DBQ on a modified document. That one is a fun one, by the way. That's one of the sourcing points that's one of the sourcing methods I forgot to address, actually. If you source right, you can actually completely flip a document. What was the prompt for that one? It was religious tolerance. That one is also really interesting because that one had documents with both sides. If you did not know how to make complex theses, you could not do that DBQ. And that was what I did. I might show it because I'm shameless and I don't care if College Board wants to sue me and throw out my goddamn APUSH score. If they want to do that, I'll just take US history again. Whatever. I should actually check. Can they sue me for that? Does anyone want to check that for me? Okay, anyways. So what he was talking about was like the fall of Rome. What caused the fall of Rome? That's a good question. And this is exactly what has happened so far. Oh god dang it. Okay. So when he was addressing this, it's you have different explanations for the fall of Rome. It was barbarians, it was cultural collapse, and then people would ask children, okay, what do you think is the basis for this? And what he said was that it's only after age 14 or so that kids sometimes can recognize that events are complicated and different people have conflicting explanations. And what he said was that even if you had time travel, even if you could literally see the events happening in real time, that would not help you explain how things are happening, or that would not get you a single narrative. People would still be debating this, like 9/11 or other recent events, COVID-19, 2008 financial crisis. We have such incredible detail about those events, and we still do not all agree on here's what happened and here's why. If recent events can't be agreed upon, why should history be any different? Even if we have hindsight is 2020, can we say we do not have omniscience over these documents or over everyone's minds? We can only work off of what we still have. So this is basically the crux of it. If you build history education by rote memorization, i.e. elementary and middle school education, you are essentially keeping the ability to process complex history things at the adolescent level. And this came out of a conversation about if I have time travel, does that mean that history academia collapses? The answer is no, it doesn't. So, with that in mind, do we have examples of debated historiography? The document is posted above. It was linked earlier. We are going over complexity point because people wanted that. By the way, don't confuse this as here's how to get complexity. This is how I think you get complexity. I am not an AP grader. The College Board should let me into that room. The cows for not letting me in. So, here's an example of a man who has had a very detailed historiography of someone as detailed and as well known as Abraham Goddamn Lincoln. Did I get a full score? You don't get that score back. You do not get that information back. I just know I got a 5. I was not chosen for a sample response. However, I look at sample response and I have a basis for the understanding of historiography for this. Oops. I feel like people left, but well, there's only 2 people on this document apparently. Anyways, Lincoln had 4 separate historical narratives for him. You had the contemporary by Herndon. You had the second one. The doc is linked above. So the first one was Herndon placing a woman in Anne Rutledge as a cause of social breakdown. 1945, Ruth Painter Randall denounces this. Okay, so now you have a second way to look at Lincoln's past. It was not Anne Rutledge who causes breakdown. And then you have the third one where the psychobiographers just didn't have enough information to work on it, but that was their main narrative. But that was their main. They were mainly looking at his childhood and how that impacted it, but they did not have enough information about that. And then finally, the fourth one, the Oral History Association. For some reason, I'm not allowed to type oral. Was founded and it looked deeper into the first-hand accounts that Herndon collected. Fun fact: there's actually an oral history program at my university. So there are 5 separate rubric suggestions. Hold on. Explaining nuance by analyzing multiple variables. So my understanding of this is not every method is effective to the same degree. In every method, why or how are the contradictions, differences, adaptations? An example of this is an AP World 2020 LQ. No, it's LQ 3. No, never mind. It's not AP World. It's APUSH. So this one, I'm gonna tell you guys how long is this study thing lasting for. I have no idea, man. It's probably gonna last for maybe another hour. Maybe 30 minutes to an hour. So this is a really trash example of like the complexity, but it is an example of the multiple variables. Oh, hold on. It's corroborate. Actually, not multiple variables. Corroborate. Corroborating the okay. I guess I'm skipping down the corroborate. Corroborating the validity of an argument for corroborating multiple perspectives. So that one is an overarching ideal may be true, but it may not be true in the same ways for each person or each subject. In what ways it acts as historical scenes reinterpret or expand the scenario or argument. In this case, you have corroboration through multiple causes and effects. And here we have disease on native populations, disease on conquest, disease on native animal populations. This one's really, I guarantee you, the writer was not thinking they were complexity for this, because what they're alluding to is right here. This is all an argument, but it's just a very good argument, I suppose. It's more detailed than what they would expect. Now, the College Board does not go through every complexity justification. They will go through 1 or 2. So it stands to reason that you would see this repeated throughout, just like different ways that different variations within a single topic or within a single reason or a single evidence idea. And it examines each of those in great detail. Can College Board make a mistake with grading? It's possible, I guess. I haven't seen it before. I wouldn't worry about it. Okay. So multiple variables. I believe this was APUSH 2021. That's the wrong one. 2019. They should not be mistaken. Does getting a 1 in your AP exams affect college? Maybe. I wouldn't worry about that. Okay, so this is APUSH 2019. Got a perfect LEQ, which we know because the sample response to College Board's LEQ for World last year. Which one was it? Which you... Okay. Let me look at specifically what they said. 21 or 22? Dang it, I'm stupid. Okay. Okay. Nuanced argument regarding the extent to which military and political conflicts influence spread of religion. Okay. Okay, you said connections with different topics or use however and choose other evidence to counter your claim. Okay, I see counter your claim. It's this one here. This is qualifying the argument. It's saying, okay, here's something that's generally true, and here's cases where it's not true. That shows that you can understand, okay, history is just like history is not monolithic. The processes and the mechanics are not monolithic. So we have to look at the divine right paragraph for that. This is, I believe, over here. What is history? I've talked about that earlier. It's the study of the narrative of past events. So here we have, for example, many rulers and leaders in Europe were strong Christian and claimed to have the divine right of kings to control, etc. Many efforts were made to control indigenous populations fully, yet in many cases, assimilation was more common. Okay, here's a divine right of kings. Here is a caveat. Many native Latin American populations worship gods such as the sun god. This one is something about religion. Military conquest was the main cause of religion. Made a connection to the mandate of heaven. That was not listed, I believe, but I see where he's going. Where they're going. Where is that listed? I did not see that. Oh, hold on. Divine Right of Kings, Guadalupe Hidalgo, Vision of Guadalupe, military conquest, many indigenous populations, human sacrifices, Jewish systems, European powers largely suppressed. I do not see anything about mandate of heaven, actually. Are you sure I'm on the right one? But yeah, for complexity, you do have to do more than just a single phrase. This one is an integral to the argument. It's not saying, because it does mention that syncretism or assimilation. So it does actually parameterize both syncretism and assimilation, and it just has an example of syncretism down there. So it actually doesn't look like it was intentional, actually. It doesn't look... It is... I can see what College was doing, but this doesn't actually look like an intentional thing. It looks like... Okay. It looks like the writer was saying, we know there was some syncretism, we know some assimilation. I'll just put them into a single paragraph. But that's my conjecture. Maybe they knew. But the thing with complexity is that's kind of complicated. So it's not... You can't really say, oh, I'm going to go for complexity. You would just need to understand the underlying mechanics and whatnot. I don't know about Asia. Someone doesn't know about Asia. They got it in a second. Anyways. So for this prompt, how would I group the documents? This one does not address 3 separate areas. It addresses it through generalized reasons. If you do 3 separate areas, that is a little bit dangerous because you are addressing based on geography. I do not recall specifically if how the geography is a problem, but I do know for a fact that my AP World teacher did not let us delineate along geography. But that may have just been a comparison essay where the difference is only geography. Because in that case, you can't really talk about much more. You can just say, oh, one's in Asia, one's in Europe. End sentence. What more can you talk about with geography? If you go more specific, like, oh, Asia, the Mongols only were in like Central Asia with steppes, and they had a nomadic population, whereas Europe had fertile plains and whatnot. I don't even know if they were fertile, and consequently were able to grow crops and have an agrarian lifestyle. And then you would have a difference in geography. Can you get complexity with just counter argument paragraph? I do not have a basis for that. I don't like to speak authoritatively on complexity. But I will say that a counter argument paragraph can help. You can't get if you just put a sentence at the end, yeah. This is why I mentioned earlier, when I address complexity, I will usually address it in several different ways, not just one part. Okay. How do I modify a corroborating argument for complexity? Let me get that. That was one I believe I did. Let me check what this one actually is before I go on. Okay, let me get that. So qualifying or modifying an argument. Hana's video on the complexity point, I'm going to be honest, it's kind of big. I don't really like it, but he is right. So qualifying and modifying an argument is saying it's not 100%. We can't say that this is the only way, or maybe the other way is saying I just don't agree with this prompt in the first place. So let me get that one. Let me get an example of that. He did say that, but his recent video was talking about how SAQs were a good example of how to get complexity. He just didn't give an example of what he meant. So the video is, I'm gonna be honest, is not very good for getting complexity. When you talk about complexity, you would have to sit down and understand the underlying historical process. You would have to sit down and understand the underlying what they want. So this is okay. This is an example of qualifying the argument. The response argues that while transatlantic voyages played a role in the transformation of the Americas, it's actually only a relatively minor first step. So the response modifies the argument by contending as the intents in colonization efforts right after. So this one's a little bit difficult because you have to be constantly referring back to the prompt. You have to say, you have to be able to address, you still have to say, you still have to correlate it back to the prompt is the issue. So this is a bit difficult and it's a bit risky, but it is legitimate. I can see where this is going. It's just saying, this is qualifying, this is modifying, this is saying, I don't agree. There are caveats to this prompt that I don't agree with this in general. I don't know if you could do that if you roll 21. Can never explain how we get it? No one can. I don't think the graders can either. It would not. I don't think the graders really can either. Dang it. Okay. Someone is telling me to look in the chat, but I don't know where. Oh. He uploaded it recently. Just check his channel. I don't need to give you specific dates. It's just recent though. Okay. Anyways, the response. Okay, so where were we? Here's also a qualification. To qualify the argument of Native American weakness. If you're wondering why Jacob called me Spinning Jenny, that's because that's my old name. Also, Jacob, this is APUSH, so you're actually incorrect. Where do I get my names from? So one of the things that this is not related at all to this, but I sometimes adhere to, but sometimes I get really fascinated with the sound of words or just like obscure references. So that's the basis for my name. Like one right now is Tomato Pomeranian. That one's not the sound of words. That's just an obscure reference. I don't want to talk about that reference, but there is a reference. Okay, where were we? Oh yes, complexity. So that's qualifying and modifying. That's corroborating. We addressed that earlier. Let me look at this one that I suggested I should look at. This is getting messy. Okay. Okay. So this is a qualification. This is from 2019, so it's a different. So it looks different, but I think it's just a bit the same. Okay. So this is an example of corroboration. It's understanding the. Hold on. Let me check what I say about that. Okay, so this is just looking at other mechanics and whatnot. Some definition of corroboration is let me get that. I do not recall either. Okay, just further supporting it, which is a little bit unclear. It's different. It's very not clear how the difference from argumentation. But see here. Okay. So this corroboration is corroborating the argument. It's not entirely clear. Let's check what I had again. Yeah, what I marked was they generally emphasize the role that economics played in their rights. So in this case, we have the civil rights are political, but here's also the economic basis for it. So in that case, it's understanding the differences in what happens. The differences in it's understanding how different experiences and different causes can relate to this event. So in this case, the different causes is also the economic basis for answering the question of ideas about democracy, which sounds like a qualification more than anything, but that's what College Board says it corroborates. Oh wait, no, it corroborates by expanding the definition. I recall now. It corroborates by expanding economic equality and prosperity into the definition of democratic ideals. Go over how to support an argument with 6 documents. You just kind of have to. There's a process. You have to start with grouping, and then you have an argument, and then you get started talking. It would probably be easiest if I just did a DBQ in front of you guys. I'm gonna do the DBQ that I'm most familiar with, which is APUSH 2021. That one is one I've had to work on. So let's start with that. Let me just got the thing down here. So okay, do AP Word. Okay. Okay, we're doing Word then. Cry about it. 2022. Golf is easier than this. God dang. Okay, we're doing 2022. 2 is not. Oh god. Did they tell you this, or did you just have to? You just have to find them. This is the freest DBQ ever. If you want, do you guys want me to do like? I could do a APU or DBQ because I have no basis on that. Okay, 6-1. Because numerous additional examples is comparison. Yes, you have the LEQ options. Okay, so this is just a lot of evidence being dumped all together. Let's see how it's connected though. I have not looked at this. I actually have to read it. Okay, our basis is the Incas. Successful to a great extent, consolidating and centralizing the authority during this period. Creation of infrastructure. Okay, that connected the capital, the empire, and by using religion to justify rule. Okay, so we have 2 parameters, 2 theses. The simple argument is just to talk about just those and just the Incans. However, Chinampas. So we have here been home to those innovations such as Chinampas. The Chinampas and the Aztec Empire are astronomical discovery in the Mayas. However, from a political standpoint, the Incas were extremely impressive as they consolidated the empire and ruled over vast expanse of land. Well, this is the Capacnan, which spawned the entirety by the state. Kind of developed a method for. Hold on. Okay. Oh no. So the problem with this is that it just named them. It didn't actually. Oh no, that's bad. So the problem with the college we're giving it is it literally just named them. It just named several. It didn't. Did it define what Chinapa is? No, it didn't. Oh no, this is bad. Okay, let me look at the other one. Maybe it's better. Because multiple empires in this time period is using religion justification rules such as the Melee of Heaven in China and the Divine Kings of Britain. We see this in the Inca Empire. Oh god. Oh god. Okay. So the reason why I wanted to find specific terms is that I've been taught to do that. Like I don't believe in name dropping. I would not like if I were grading this, I would not have agreed with giving this complexity just because they didn't define any of the terms or connect to them at all. They were just like, oh, by the way, here's the thing that matters. And sentence that no. You're not supposed to do that. I don't like doing that. And I wouldn't have agreed with giving this complexity, but fine. By the way, fun fact, this gets Latinized in different ways. I've seen that with Capacnan. Okay. Cahokia and Pueblo culture. I think this was given because they just had so many. But the fact that this was given with basically zero argumentation or analysis, I don't really like that. Like, it just doesn't really... I guess for purposes of complexity, it shows, okay, the student can at least make connections between different periods, between different geographical regions. That has value. I just don't agree with giving it just because of this name drop. Like, it wasn't... If you want to... Okay, it wasn't name dropped exactly. It did have some context. Pre-Columbian states have been home to some innovations. Okay, so we know that it relates to the Incan infrastructure. Okay, so we have a basis for this. They relate by the fact that they're both innovations. Okay, So we also have this debate down here to put this in the context with the Europeans. They didn't talk about that at all, but they didn't talk about that at all in the complexity. But that's probably a factor. They also mentioned the Pueblo and Cahokia. This is a bit more detailed. Pueblo architecture inside the mountains or the Aztecs' extremely impressive food system. Okay, so this LQ has successfully caused me to. This LQ is a little bit annoying to me, but okay. I'll have to document this then because it's. Oh god. Okay, we're writing DBQ. I'm moving on. Which APs did I take? Okay, let's see. AP World, APUSH, AP Physics, AP Lang, AP. It was not AP. Oh yeah, I was supposed to do this blind, wasn't I? AP Lang, AP Push, AP Physics, AP Calc, AP Stats, AP Gov, AP Macro, AP Stats, AP English Literature, AP Psychology, and is that it? No, that wasn't it. What else was there?